What up, what up? Representing. Yeah, this basically just came up. It was a horror that happened in Taiwan, so... And also, guys, if you guys hear a little bit of like background noise or anything, please let me know because I tried to fix it.
Taiwan, a densely populated country off the coast of China and one of my former homes, celebrated for her warm-hearted locals, delicious food, and for having one of the lowest crime rates in the world. But that hasn't always been the case. In the shadows of the island's past, there was a time when even its brightest stars weren't safe.
How's the audio?
In this episode,
good?
we'll be exploring one of the most disturbing cases I've ever covered on this channel. One involving celebrities, psychopaths, and an insatiable media frenzy that changed this small island nation forever.
Isn't that the fucking guy from
And an insatiable...
Hold on. Black Phone 2, the mask. Yeah, right there. Look. It's this guy, exactly. It's the same mask. It's crazy.
Media frenzy that changed this small island
Scary
nation
as fuck. Imagine
forever.
just, going to sleep
This
and
is
then
the
just
story.
seeing
One
this
and
right
changed
here.
this small island
The
nation
mask
forever.
in front of you.
This is the story of Pai Xiaoyan,
Pao
a young
Xiaoyan.
woman caught in the crosshairs of a
Pao
headline.
Xiaoyan.
Before we dive in, take a
Hold
quick
on.
moment to open up Google and search your name. Trust me, the results might just give you a chill.
Fuck that. I ain't doxing
I did
myself.
this not so long ago, and there it all was. My email, phone number, even my home address, all out in the open
All
on
that's
public
probably gonna
listing
happen
sites.
is... Listen,
Creepy,
if
right?
you're gonna search on my name, all you're probably gonna see is my LinkedIn profile, so I don't care.
That's when I discovered today's sponsor, Aura.
Or
Turns out, data brokers were having a field day selling my info to robocallers, spammers, and scammers. And if you're not protected, they're likely doing the same with yours. But that's where Aura can help. They're apps like a personal bodyguard for you and your family against those invisible online threats. It spots the data brokers exposing your personal details and submits opt-out requests on your behalf. These brokers are legally required to remove your info if you ask them to, but they make it extremely / better known by her stage name, Bing. This is Pai Suihua, better known by her stage name, Bing Bing. A successful singer, comic actress, and TV presenter, famous throughout her homeland of Taiwan. Bing Bing's rise to prominence began in 1973 when she won a televised singing competition, prompting her to pursue a career in entertainment. In 1975, she moved to Fukuoka, Japan to study singing and acting, hoping to later return to Taipei and make a name for herself. It was while studying abroad that she met and fell in love with writer, manga artist, and wrestling enthusiast Ikki Kajiwara, the famous, or perhaps infamous, creator of Tiger Mask and Ashita no Jo. Though his work is still highly regarded by manga enthusiasts, Ikki himself had a less than stellar reputation. During his youth, he had been something of a delinquent, much more interested in fighting than studying. He carried much of that aggression with him into adulthood too, often taking it out on the women in his life. Bing Bing did her best to look beyond Ikki's faults, and after a 3-year romance, the pair decided to marry.
Oh, I
That
thought you wanted to
following
say you were gonna break
year,
up.
Their daughter, Pai Xiaoyan, was born.
Pao Xiaoyan.
You may have noticed that Xiaoyan kept her mother's maiden name. And that's because Bing Bing divorced Ikki shortly after Xiaoyan was born. Not only had Ikki been sneaking around behind her back and having extramarital affairs, but he had also been taking his pent-up frustrations out on her, beating her whenever she dared to question his loyalty.
Crazy.
Fed up with being mistreated, Bing Bing took Xiaoyan and returned to Taipei as a single mother. Though Ikki would pass away from pancreatitis just a few short years after the split, Bing Bing herself would go from strength to strength. Her studies in Japan had equipped her for a life of showbiz success, and she quickly became one of the most recognizable variety show hosts on Taiwanese TV, beloved for her quick wit and bantering style of chit-chat. For all my UK viewers, The Independent once described her as the Cilla Black of Taiwan, and as her daughter, Xiaoyan, got older, Bing Bing had enough influence to land her small roles alongside her. Despite her mother's and late father's celebrity status, Xiaoyan matured into a remarkably down-to-earth young woman, and had what many described as a pure soul, lacking both her father's aggression and her mother's sometimes cynical worldview. She seemed to see the good in everyone, and always tried to assist others whenever she could, rushing over to help lost tourists with directions, for example. Bing Bing had often cautioned her young daughter about helping strangers, worried about their true intentions. "You always think the worst of people, Mum," she'd reply.
You always think.
A bright spark and an excellent public speaker, Xiao Yan hoped to one day become a journalist, a goal her teachers were sure she could achieve. April 14th, 1997. It was a warm Monday morning in southern Taipei, and Xiao Yan, now 16, kissed her mother Bingbing goodbye before setting off from their spacious villa towards Xingwu High School. She would never make it there.
Shit.
At some point during her walk to school, a group of 3 men in a white van pulled up beside her, grabbed her, and sped off without drawing any attention.
Listen, story time actually. I remember this one time, like, I don't know, how old was I? I was 10, something like that. And back then they had like, people who do human trafficking. Like, they take you into a bus and then they like remove your organs and they sell them to like on the dark web and shit like that. So, and they were notorious for having a white van actually. And, I was a young kid and then my father and my mother, they told me like, hey, be careful, like they're kidnapping kids, you know what I mean, in my country, because like it was all in the news and everything, like they were notorious for like kidnapping, especially little children, and then just removing their organs. And then I remember this one time that I saw a white van stop in front of me, and then I got scared as fuck, because they say like if a white van stops and like the person steps out and he like asks you for candy or something like that. If you take the candy, they're gonna grab you inside and remove your organs and sell them on the dark web. So this one time I was walking towards home, I think it wasn't on the way from school, but it was on the way home back. So then I saw a white van and he stopped right in front of me. I got scared as fuck. I'm pretty sure they weren't trying to catch my organs or anything, because it was like clear daylight, but still I got scared as fuck. And I went home and I went crying because I was so scared. Like when I was younger, I was scared of almost everything. So that was one thing that happened to me, and since then, I never took that same route again. I always made sure to like go a different way, to like don't see that white van anymore. It's crazy.
Bingbing returned to the villa at around 4 p.m. and noticed her daughter still hadn't returned from school. It was then that she received a call that would change her life forever. "Shut up and don't say a word," slurred a man through the receiver.
Don't say a word.
"We have your daughter. Check outside, and you'll see we're telling the truth.
That was the...
Don't call the police, or the bitch is dead. You got it?"
You got it.
Bingbing followed the man's command and peered outside her doorway. There, nestled in a bush, was Xiao Yan's lunchbox. Inside, she found a ransom note, written in her daughter's handwriting.
Fuck.
"Mum, I'm hurt bad. Please save my life by preparing $5 million in cash, and don't contact the authorities, or they'll kill me. Stay by the phone. They'll call again." But even more disturbing than that note was what she found underneath it. 3 photos of her daughter, Xiao Yan, her hands bound, her
Fuck.
mouth gagged.
What?
There was also a small object, wrapped in tissue paper. She
Teeth.
opened it up to reveal its contents.
It's teeth.
It was one of Xiao Yan's pinky fingers.
Ah!
Without hesitation, Bingbing nervously dialed 110, Taiwan's emergency number. She knew that getting the authorities involved was a risk, but she also understood that blindly paying the ransom wouldn't guarantee her daughter's life. The police should at least know how to handle the situation, and as long as they were discreet, the kidnappers needn't know that they were involved. Officers arrived at Bingbing's villa within the hour. It was imperative that at this early stage, the whole incident be kept under wraps to give Xiao Yan the best chance of survival. And yet, despite the police requesting a 12-day information blackout from the media, that next morning, news of Xiao Yan's capture made front-page headlines in 2 Taipei newspapers, The Great News and the China Daily. The editors of both publications knew that reporting on the story would place Xiao Yan's life at risk. And yet, fierce competition and rivalry between the 2 papers meant that neither was willing to let the story pass by, out of fear the other may report on it first. Pai Bingbing was a household name at that point, so the story was bound to garner some huge ratings.
To be honest, this is really confusing.
They couldn't just allow their competition to steal the scoop. The authorities spent the equivalent of $12,000 trying to buy up every newspaper that reported on the incident, desperate to keep their involvement under wraps. But it was too little, too late. Now that the cat was out of the bag, every bloodsucker in the city descended upon Bingbing's home, hounding her for information and making the police's investigation all the more difficult. Journalists camped outside Bingbing's property 24/7, thirsty for any tidbit of information. With news of the incident spreading like wildfire, more than 1,000 officers were deployed, and Lien Chan, Taiwan's premier at the time, personally visited Bingbing to reassure her that every possible effort was being made to bring Xiao Yan home. As you can imagine, all of this unwanted attention angered the group holding Xiao Yan for ransom. On April 16th, they once again called Bingbing, this time from a different phone number. They asked if the money was ready. She responded, "Is my daughter still alive?" In the background, Bingbing could hear her daughter, Xiao Yan, reading off that day's news headlines, including the story of her own capture. Unfortunately, her captors hung up before detectives could trace where the call was coming from. On the morning of April 17th, the perps called for a third time from a third number, and once again asked if the money was ready. Bingbing confirmed it was.
It was ready.
They hung up, ensuring that the call was short enough not to be traced. At 3:30 p.m, they called again, telling Bingbing where and when to meet them. Bingbing gathered up the $5 million, over $9 million in today's money, and 1 hour later, she set off to meet the bandits, closely followed by undercover detectives in a car disguised as a taxi. Frustratingly, these detectives weren't the only ones tailing Bingbing. Reporters and news helicopters followed close behind her as she attempted to drop off the ransom.
That's stupid as fuck, because what do you mean, like, you're supposed to, like, meet up with somebody and give him their money? You know, you try to be hidden. Alright, cool, like, I get that part. What do you mean you get a whole-ass helicopter and a whole-ass crew behind you? What's the point of being undercover at that point? Like...
This clued Xiao Yan's captors into the police's presence, and the exchange was aborted. The following day, they contacted Bingbing yet again, and instructed her to drive around Taipei and await further instructions. No doubt they were keeping tabs on her as she drove, and noticed that with every turn she made, news vehicles tailgated her, desperate to broadcast the exchange live. For obvious reasons, the kidnappers didn't agree to meet with Bingbing that evening. They wouldn't call her for 6 days. On April 23rd, a third handover was organised. Bingbing was to bring the money to a nearby stadium at 7 p.m, and this time she was to make sure that she wasn't followed. Unfortunately, that was completely outside of her control. Again, she was tailed by the news reporters. And again, the 3 bandits didn't show up.
Stupid as fuck.
It began to feel as if a handover was impossible. By this point, the authorities have been able to link the multiple...
To be honest, what you should have done is just basically just say, do not announce it on the news. Like, just simply just keep it between you and me. Like, hey, listen up, my daughter's been kidnapped, help me out. But listen, leave the media out of this shit, because it's only gonna get you more trouble, you know what I mean? Like, if you left the media out, probably, if he disguised as a taxi, or like something, or like a cab, then the chances would have been very much bigger to catch him.
Phone numbers being used by the captors to 3 men. Lin Chunsheng, Chen Qianxing, and Gao Tianmin, a trio with long criminal histories who had met while incarcerated together. They suspected that these 3 men were the ones behind Xiao Yan's disappearance, but still had no idea where they were hiding out. As if to taunt Bingbing, the 3 perps placed another call to her home phone number on April 24th. She answered it, but instead of the usual male voice, Bingbing heard the terrified cries of Xiao Yan.
"Stop it! I don't want to die! Mum, please save me!"
Bingbing tearfully listened to her daughter begging to be saved on the other end of the line. She had no idea her daughter was already dead. On April 28th, 2 weeks after she had been taken, Pai Xiaoyan's remains were discovered in a drainage ditch in Zhonggang Dabai, weighed down in the water by dumbbells. Her life had been ended around 10 days prior, while the ransom negotiations were still ongoing. After the second exchange had fallen through, a frustrated Lin, Chen, and Gao returned to the apartment where they were holding Xiao Yan. They beat her, whipped her, and ended her life. They then continued to plan the exchange, using an impersonator, likely Chen's wife, to fake Xiao Yan's voice over the phone, giving the impression she was still alive. Xiao Yan's clothless body showed signs of mutilation, and her liver had been ruptured, though ultimately her COD was determined to be strangulation. The day after she was found, the China Times published a photograph of Xiao Yan's corpse on its front page, along with an arrow pointing to where her pinky finger had been chopped off. The headline read, "They tore up the check," meaning they killed their $5 million hostage. The newspaper ran this front page without regard for their readers, and without regard for Bingbing, who found a copy waiting for her inside her mailbox. It's an image that remains burned into her mind to this very day. Bingbing laid her daughter to rest on Mother's Day, 1997. In the days and weeks that followed, journalists continued to call her up and ask for exclusive interviews. Given the media's relentless reporting on the case, the general public began to fear that Taiwan was no longer safe, and they felt that way for good reason. Between 1990 and 1996, the crime rate had risen by about 80%. By the second half of 1996, 1 in 7 Taiwanese had been assaulted or robbed. 5 to 10% of government officials were believed to have gang affiliations, and for many, Xiao Yan's slaying was the final straw. Mass demonstrations were taking place throughout Taipei and Kaohsiung, with protesters demanding order be restored. The authorities were under enormous pressure to bring Lin, Chen, and Gao to justice before they struck again. The task force set up to capture these 3 men was given one clear instruction, an instruction which went against protocol. Gentlemen, when you find these 3 men, not if, when, do not let them escape. Should they show any sign of resistance, no matter how small, kill them without warning. An island-wide manhunt was now
they didn't even do anything.
underway, and thanks in large part to Bingbing, the task force had one vital lead to work with.
But still,
During their final taunting call,
upset they probably it, so I guess.
She had managed to keep one of the men talking long enough for an analyst to trace where the call was being made from. A raid was immediately launched on the gang's makeshift hideout, an unassuming rented apartment on the outskirts of Taipei. Though 12 accessories, including Chen's wife, Changsu Chen, were taken into custody, the 3 main suspects were able to escape without being captured. Lin, Chen, and Gao, Taiwan's 3 most wanted, were still at large, and would be for quite some time. Despite their faces being plastered all over the country on wanted posters, the men were able to evade capture by wearing disguises. The slender Gao dressed as a woman, frequently donning a dress and makeup to avoid detection. During the next 4 months, the trio committed over 20 SAs, and even held various other high-profile figures for ransom.
Crazy.
These deals were far more successful for the group, who received payment without any of their victims' family members contacting the authorities. Now well funded, and facing investigators with minimal forensic knowledge, Lin, Chen, and Gao were able to live lavishly under the radar. But that all came to an end on August 19th, when the 3 fugitives were spotted by 2-foot patrol officers in a residential neighborhood at 11:50 a.m. A brief exchange of gunfire ensued, during which Lim was hit 6 times. One of the officers, Sao Li Min, lost his life during the encounter. Though the other was gravely wounded, he did manage to track down Lin, who, with his back against the wall, decided to end his own existence rather than be taken alive. Reinforcements were promptly dispatched to the neighborhood, and over 800 officers conducted a comprehensive search of the area. Chen and Gao were nowhere to be found. They had successfully escaped for a second time. 1 down, 2 to go. After spending 2 further months on the run, on October 23rd, Gao and Chen went into a cosmetic clinic owned by one Dr. Fang. They held Fang, his wife, and a nurse at gunpoint, and forced them to perform face-altering plastic surgery. In East Asia, approximately 50% of people are born with double eyelids. That is, they have arch-shaped creases in their upper eyelids. Gao was born with such creases, but had the surgeon transform his eyes into monolids. "There," Dr. Fang muttered after completing Gao's surgery. "Now nobody will recognize you." Gao admired his reflection in the mirror, and coldly replied, "You will." He and Chen then killed Dr. Fang and his wife, the nurse, and then ended her life too, before fleeing the scene. Now
What a fucking
confident that he
bitch.
wouldn't be recognized out in public, Gao began letting his guard down. He visited a massage parlor in downtown Taipei, but contrary to his expectations, one astute officer thought that he looked familiar and called for reinforcements. Backup swiftly arrived, and hundreds of policemen combed through the building that Gao was seen to have entered. They backed the killer into a corner, and, unable to escape, Gao put a round through his own brain. The following day, the United Evening News and the China Times Express featured front-page, close-up color photos of Gao's head in full detail. 2 down, 1 to
Let's
go.
go.
The media continued to report on the case as if it were a blockbuster movie, plastering Chen's face on every newspaper and TV broadcast, all the while releasing more and more gruesome details about Cao Yan's brutal slaying. Up until that point, Chen had been enjoying his notoriety, even telling the women that he SA'd who he was just to see their reaction. But with his 2 accomplices now gone, and fearing that the fuzz were hot on his heels, our last man standing began to fear for his life. And to try and bargain his way out of things, he decided to do something drastic. On November 18th, Chen broke into the home of the South African military attaché, Colonel McGill Alexander. With guns akimbo, he held McGill and his family hostage. Chen instructed Melanie, one of McGill's daughters, to call CNN and explain the situation. Within an hour, both the authorities and countless news teams surrounded the house. Every TV station sent crews to the scene for virtually continuous on-the-spot reporting. The media collectively monopolized the only available communication channel with the mentally and emotionally unstable Chen, with little regard for the safety of the Alexander family. Since negotiators were unable to get a direct line of communication with Chen, much of their dialogue was conducted through open windows. Chen yelled at officers to stay back, and, in response, the officers taunted him, prompting Chen to open fire while using Melanie as a human shield. McGill managed to convince Chen to release his daughter and use him as the shield instead. The officers seized this opportunity to enter the home via the garage, catching Chen by surprise,
W dad. That's all I'm saying.
and
W
prompting him
dad.
to fire recklessly towards them. One of his shots went through Melanie's wrist and into her back, lodging between 2 arteries in her pelvis.
Oof, still later.
Her father, McGill, was struck in the leg. The officers were forced to retreat. Shortly after this failed siege, Chen spoke over the phone with a news anchor and
I mean, do you think you can survive when you get shot through the leg? I think you'll definitely be in pain. I mean, like, you probably survived, right? I mean, his daughter had definitely had it way worse, but
stated that he would free the hostages if Frank Tse, a prominent
I
politician,
think it's also because it's like what it hits. If it hits like
future
a
premier,
muscle or something,
personally
then,
came
hey,
into the
you're
house
fucked.
and negotiated for the release of Chen's wife and brother-in-law, both then serving sentences of 12 years and life respectively for their involvement in Cao Yan's slaying. This call was broadcast live on TV.
谁现在你可以告诉我，那个枪是哪里来？当时您逃亡的费用是哪里来的？
枪这个问题是不能讲的啦。
怎么说？
啊，枪怎么可以讲呢？
What language do they speak in Taiwan? I think Mandarin.
做人还是要有一点道义嘛。
Sounds like
那
Mandarin
在
at
过去
least.
一段时间，您逃亡的过程当中，警方在大力的欺负您，您是怎么过日子？您可不可以告诉我？
Frank arrived at 9 p.m. that same night. At 10 p.m., he entered the house. Frank quickly established a rapport with Chen and convinced him to release McGill and Melanie so that they could receive medical treatment. There were so many news vans and reporters outside the house that ambulances had trouble reaching the scene, and cameras were shoved into McGill's face as he was escorted out of the house. When McGill himself shouted at camera operators to back off so that his daughter could get to an ambulance, they had the audacity to get angry with him.
Like, fuck you mean? You stand in front of his house, let him go through! Shit just pisses me off, just look. What do you mean all the people be standing right there for what? They're doing for nothing.
Thankfully, both father and daughter would go on to make full recoveries.
Okay.
Law enforcement brought Chen's wife to the house on the morning of November 19th to assist in mediating the situation. Further negotiations resulted in the release of McGill's youngest daughter and foster son. McGill's wife, Anne, was the final hostage released by Chen. At 4 p.m. on November 19th, Chen surrendered and was taken into custody, 20 hours after he had entered the Alexander family's home, and 7 months after going on the run. For his heinous actions in life, he was given 5 death sentences.
I thought he was about to say 5 years in prison. Like, what do you mean 5 years?
Behind bars, Chen would go on to become a pious man, stating that while he held the Alexander family captive, he noticed them praying and admired their resolve. He was later moved when the family visited him in person and forgave him for his actions. Some believe this Christian conversion was merely a last-ditch effort by Chen to manipulate the media further and save his own skin.
Still don't believe it.
If that was indeed his plan though, it didn't work. Chen was executed on the 6th of October, 1999.
That's what you get.
Guards at the prison burned so-called hell money in his name, offerings made to help Chen resolve any issues that he might have in the afterlife. In the aftermath of this whole ordeal, the police, the government, and the news media were all heavily criticized for their countless failures and their inability to protect the public. The authorities accepted that they were underprepared for the situation. Thankfully, in the years following Cao Yan's slaying and the Alexander family siege, Taiwanese law enforcement have developed new and superior tactics to track down and deal with such crises. Numerous government ministers resigned from their posts too, including the aforementioned Premier, Lien Chan. Over time, law and order were restored. Today, Taiwan is ranked as the 2nd safest place to live in the world. Demonstrators also condemned what they called the 8 black-hearted media outlets, who, in their minds, were responsible for Pai Cao-yen's demise. The China Times, the Rebar TV station, the Great News, China Daily, the Independence Morning News, the Minsheng Daily News, the First Hand Weekly, and the TVBS network.
Country, so I think it also has a lot to do
in response
with the
to
fact
mounting.
that I think it's also because Taiwan is so small. That's why they also say it's the safest country in the world. Well, one off. You can also say the same shit about Monaco. You can also say, like, Monaco is one of the safest countries in the world. Well, no shit. Have you seen how small it is?
Putting public pressure,
Easy.
China Times editor-in-chief, Mr. Chen Gaoxiang, offered his resignation, but was retained by management. Ultimately, no members of the press were criminally prosecuted. New guidelines and standards have since been introduced to ensure that no media circuses like this ever happen again. In the wake of this ordeal, Pai Bingbing retired from being a TV starlet. That side of her had perished with the loss of her daughter, and she instead devoted the rest of her life to public service. She established the Swallow Foundation, a charity that advocates for capital punishment and provides legal support for local crime victims. Independent writer Richard Lloyd Parry noted that the attention around her daughter's slaying had given Bingbing a, quote, greater, though more terrible fame than she had as an entertainer. Though her work is now far more solemn than it once was, Bingbing has stated that she finds helping people far more rewarding than entertaining them. In 2020, she sued a social media user who made an Instagram post saying that she should die in the water like her daughter did.
It's crazy.
I spent 15 years trying to erase that memory, Bingbing recounted. But that comment managed to bring it all back to me. Years after losing Cao Yan, Bingbing tried to have another child via in vitro fertilization. Her attempts were unsuccessful.
I still don't get it by the mask.
A huge thank you to my